Hello Year 12, this is a quick screencast of the lesson that we did preparing you for the Section B of your AS Media Studies exam, the Institutions and Audiences bit about newspapers. Okay, so in this lesson we looked at learning to understand the types of questions which come up in Section B, and we're going to learn a response called a three-step plan approach to structuring a response. Okay, the absolute essentials for success in this, what you need to be able to do, I think can be condensed as 2 points. One, you need to have a good knowledge of the issues surrounding the newspaper industry in terms of how it's affecting the institutions and the audiences. So you've got to know your case study really well. You've also got to be able to think on your feet and quickly come up with 3 or 4 points to answer whatever question it is that you've set. You've got to think quite creatively there in the planning process, so you need to practice doing that. Here is a typical sample question that we looked at in the lesson. The question is, what significance does the continuing development of digital media technology have for media institutions and audiences? And then you choose to focus on one of the areas. We focus here on newspapers, but it also says you can make reference to other media in your answer, so you're not just entirely stuck to writing about newspapers, but the main thrust of your essay should certainly be about the newspaper industry. What we did in the lesson is we looked at the process of coming up with ideas, and we brainstormed ideas to answer that question, considering production, distribution and consumption in the newspaper industry. And more specifically, we broke those things down a little bit. We thought about, well, what's significant about the influence of new digital media on how it's produced, on how it's marketing, on targeting audiences, on distribution, on accessibility to audiences, on regulation and the laws surrounding newspapers and news. We talked about audience interaction. And these are just some of the things that you could consider when answering this question. We go back to our question: what significance does the continuing development of digital media technology have for media institutions and audiences? So we've got to always come back to this key word here. What is the significance? Why are these things important? So really, with our thinking process, we thought, okay, so what are the sort of areas we need to be thinking about? And then we decided to try and come up with some significances, come up with some things that were important about the influence of new digital media on these areas. Okay, so once we've done that, we looked at the three-step plan technique. This is a really useful way, I think, to organise your essay. So step one of the three-step plan is to answer the question in your first sentence, which we did with something like this: when considering the newspaper industry, the continued development of digital media technologies is highly significant. Now, can you see there, I've used the key words of the question in that first sentence. So I'm making it really clear to the examiner that I'm answering the question from the start. Step two is to list the points that you're going to make in your second sentence. So you need 3 or 4 main points. You're writing for 45 minutes. Here we've got, for example, it's making news far more accessible. It's allowing audiences to interact with the news to a far greater extent, and it's making it much more difficult for institutions to make money from their businesses. So we've got 3 points there, 3 things that we think are significant, and we've listed them. The advantage of this is that it forces you to plan in order to be able to write your first paragraph, and it will really help you with your structure, because the third step, what you then go on to do, is you turn each of these 3 points into a developed section of your essay. Okay, so if we go back to my introduction here, you can see my first point here is making news far more accessible. We're looking at accessibility. So my first paragraph begins with accessibility. It's very clear that digital media technology has made it easier to access news. For example, in the case of the Daily Mirror a website has been developed and then you go in and you talk about that and you discuss that at length. You write a lot about this idea of accessibility and how you might go on to write about the impact of iPads and mobile phones and mobile technologies and things like that. Then you go on to look at, in your next section, you'll write about audience interaction, and then you'll go on to write about the impact on institutions in terms of the financial side of the industry. So that is the three-step plan.